Hello and welcome to this video. Today we will study one of the most famous poems of Sylvia Plath. The poem is called Lady Lazarus. Sylvia Plath was an American poet. She lived from 1932 to 1963. She is remembered as a confessional poet. Confessional poetry means poetry that reveals private and painful feelings. It talks openly about the poet's own life. It can include subjects like family problems, mental health, sadness, and death. Plath is one of the most important writers in this type of poetry. Plath's life was full of struggle. She suffered from depression. She also tried to end her life more than once. Even though her life was short, her poems are studied all over the world because they are powerful and emotional. Now let us begin with the poem Lady Lazarus by Sylvia Plath. The poem was written in 1962, just 1 year before Plath's death. It is one of her darkest and strongest poems. Title and meaning. The title of the poem comes from the Bible. In the Bible, there was a man named Lazarus. He died, but Jesus brought him back to life. This story is about resurrection. Resurrection means rising from death and living again. Plath changes the story. She does not write about a man, but about herself. She calls her poem Lady Lazarus. By doing this, she imagines herself as a woman who has faced death many times, but always comes back alive. The title already shows that the poem is about death and rebirth. Summary of the poem. The speaker of the poem, who is Sylvia Plath herself, says that she has died before. In her real life, she survived 2 suicide attempts. She compares her survival to a performance, like a show that people come to watch. She says the audience is interested in her pain and suffering. The poem also uses images from war. She compares herself to victims of the Holocaust. The Holocaust was the mass killing of Jewish people and others by the Nazis during World War II. She mentions lampshades made of human skin, bones, and other shocking details. These are very disturbing images. She uses them to show the cruelty of the world and the depth of her suffering. At the end of the poem, she changes the tone. She says she will rise again like a phoenix. A phoenix is a bird from ancient mythology that burns in flames but rises alive again from the ashes. She does not use the word phoenix in the poem but paints it through imagery. By using this image, she says that even though she suffers, she will return with new strength. Her final warning is that when she rises, she will eat men like air. This means she will no longer be weak or oppressed. Instead, she will become strong and powerful. Line-by-line explanation. The speaker says she has done it again. This refers to attempting suicide again. She explains that almost every 10 years she tries to kill herself. The word manage shows that she sees death as an action she has carried out, like a task. She calls herself a walking miracle. This means she survived death, even though survival feels strange. Her skin is compared to a Nazi lampshade. During the Holocaust, there were stories that Nazis used human skin for lampshades. She uses this disturbing image to show how fragile and object-like her body feels. She then mentions her right foot, beginning a description of her body. Her foot feels heavy, like a paperweight. Her face seems blank, without features. She compares her face to fine Jew linen. Linen is cloth. During the Holocaust, Jewish bodies were wrapped in cloth when buried. The reference shows death, suffering, and dehumanization. In the next stanza, she imagines someone pulling away a covering, like pulling off a napkin from her face. She calls this person enemy, showing anger toward doctors, the audience, or society. She asks, "Do I terrify?" meaning, does her survival and appearance scare people? Then she describes her face like a skull, nose, empty eye pits, teeth. She says her sour breath will vanish soon, as if she is close to death again. She says her flesh, which death had swallowed, will soon belong to her again. The grave cave means the grave, a dark place like a cave. She imagines her body returning to life, but the image is still dark. A smiling woman means she will look normal again. She reminds us she is only 30 years old. She compares herself to a cat, which is said to have 9 lives. She claims she can die 9 times. She says this is her 3rd suicide attempt. She calls it trash, showing bitterness. To annihilate each decade means to destroy herself once every 10 years. She feels surrounded by a million filaments, like wires or lights. She describes people as a peanut-crunching crowd. This suggests an audience at a circus, watching for entertainment. They come to see her like a performance. She says people unwrap her body like in a striptease. This comparison shows humiliation, because her pain is treated as a spectacle. She directly addresses the audience as gentlemen, ladies. She presents her body parts to the audience. She admits she is thin, reduced to skin and bone. Her suffering body becomes part of the show. She says despite her condition, she is still the same person. She remembers her first suicide attempt at age 10. She calls it an accident, showing it was not fully planned. However, her second attempt was serious. She wanted to die permanently. She says she rocked shut, like closing a door. This shows her desire to end life fully. She compares herself to a closed seashell. Doctors had to revive her again and again. She imagines worms on her body, comparing them to pearls. This image connects beauty with decay. She declares that dying is an art form. It means, she compares it to painting or writing. She claims she performs this art very well, almost with pride. She says dying feels painful, like hell. But it also feels real, giving her strong experience. She suggests she has a call, meaning a calling or vocation, like a career. She says suicide can be done in private, in a cell. It is easy to stay dead. But she focuses on theatrical deaths, those that shock and attract attention. She describes her survival as a theatrical comeback, like a performer returning on stage. She comes back to the same world, same people, same cruelty. The audience greets her survival with shouts, like a show. The crowd calls her survival a miracle. This shocks her, knocks me out, because they treat it as entertainment. She says, there is a charge, meaning there is a price to pay for seeing her. She demands payment for people who stare at her scars. Even hearing her heartbeat has a price. She insists her heart truly works. She repeats that there is a price, and it is high. Even her words, her touch, or her blood have value. She says even her hair or clothes are part of this transaction. She addresses her doctor and her enemy. Her is German for Mr. This shows her anger toward doctors or men who control her body, and it recalls Nazi authority. She says she is their opus, meaning a work of art. She calls herself their invaluable, like treasure. She sarcastically calls herself a pure gold baby, showing irony. She says her beauty and value melt into a scream. She burns with anger and pain. She ironically tells her audience not to think she underestimates their concern, though she feels their interest is false. She imagines herself as ashes after burning. The audience pokes and stirs her remains, like in a fire. She says nothing is left but emptiness. She lists objects made from human remains during the Holocaust: soap, jewelry, dental gold. She shows how death reduces people to objects. She addresses both God and Lucifer. The word beware is used for warning. She shows defiance against all authority, both divine and evil. The poem ends with rebirth. Like a phoenix, she rises from ashes. Her red hair symbolizes fire, power, and life. She declares she will consume men easily, like air, showing strength and revenge. Themes in Lady Lazarus. The first theme is death and resurrection. The speaker dies but returns again and again. This shows the struggle between life and death. The second theme is performance. She describes her suffering as a show. This shows how personal pain can sometimes become a spectacle for others. The third theme is oppression. Oppression means unfair control or cruelty. She compares herself to victims of war, showing how women and she herself have suffered under power and cruelty. The fourth theme is anger and revenge. At the end of the poem, the speaker warns her enemies. She will rise stronger and punish those who tried to destroy her. Imagery and symbolism. Sylvia Plath uses very strong images in Lady Lazarus. She uses war imagery, such as Nazi camps, lampshades, and bones. This creates a picture of horror and cruelty. She also uses mythological imagery, like Lazarus from the Bible and the phoenix from ancient stories. These images represent rebirth and survival. The Nazi imagery shows extreme cruelty, suffering, and oppression. The imagery of a show or performance shows that her pain is being displayed in front of others. It makes the reader think about how suffering can be turned into entertainment. Lady Lazarus as confessional poetry. Lady Lazarus is a good example of confessional poetry. Confessional poetry is personal. It reveals secrets, private struggles, and hidden feelings. Sylvia Plath uses her own experiences of sadness and suicide attempts in the poem. She mixes her personal pain with history and myth. She speaks about her depression and her will to survive. This makes the poem both shocking and deeply human. Questions and answers. Who is Lady Lazarus? Lady Lazarus is the speaker of the poem. She compares herself to Lazarus from the Bible, a man who was brought back to life. What is the main theme of the poem? The main theme is death and resurrection. It is about survival, anger, and power after suffering. What does the phoenix symbolize in the poem? The phoenix symbolizes rebirth, survival, and new strength. Why is Lady Lazarus called confessional poetry? Because the poem openly reveals Plath's personal struggles, sadness, and inner pain. To conclude, Lady Lazarus by Sylvia Plath is not only about death. It is about survival, anger, and the search for power. Sylvia Plath shows her pain in a personal way, but also shows her strength. The poem is disturbing, but it is also inspiring. It reminds us that even in great pain, there can be rebirth and new power.